Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik. If this is your first time, in our episodes, I discuss with my guests on topics like relating to hospitality, technological trends, and also relating to humanity. So today's topic somehow touches on all those pillars: hospitality, technology, and humanity. Namely, we'll have a conversation about fraud. In this discussion, we'll delve into complex issue of fraud in the hospitality industry and taking inspiration also how fraud is handled in other industries, exploring its various forms, ranging from guest fraud and staff theft to management misconduct. The conversation provides insights into the pressures that hospitality workers face and the increasing demands from customers, all of which can contribute to unethical behavior. We aim to also touch on the importance of sustainability in the industry and the potential risks of greenwashing, emphasizing the need of vigilance and healthy skepticism. You learn about the psychological motivation behind fraud, the role of the fraud triangle: opportunity, rationalization, pressure, and the importance of understanding the human element in preventing and addressing fraudulent activities. So my guests are Carin-Isabel Knoop. She's the author of Compassionate Mental Health in Modern Workplace and the executive director of research team at Harvard Business School. She's half French and half German, was born in Mexico, has lived in 4 continents. She has co-authored hundreds of numerous case studies and articles that have contributed significantly to the fields of organizational behavior and leadership. Her work often delves into the challenges of modern management, the importance of empathy, the complexities of human interactions in professional settings. She's particularly interested in supporting individuals in healthcare, middle management, tourism, and education. Her interest in tourism is it as a labor-driven business. So welcome, Carin. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And then a guest also, David E. Morrison, or Dr. David Morrison, the third, is an organizational psychiatrist with over 15 years of experience in working with senior corporate executives on leadership and executive functioning. The focus of this work is to deepen the capacity of senior executives to be self-aware. With a refined process of individual and senior management team consultation, he has worked successfully for companies in many industries and with multiple levels of management and management structures. He's among others the co-editor of Bringing Freud to Fraud, Understanding the State of Mind. A team of editors offers a useful conceptual approach called ABC analysis: bad apple, bushel, and crop, which we'll learn about in our discussion. We aim to underscore the value of fostering a positive and solution-oriented approach, recognizing the humanity in both guests and staff. So again, David, warm welcome, and both of you, and thanks for joining us today. I thought first to think for our audience to get some background. I'd like to thank you, Carin, first of all, to bringing us together. We know each other from Malta. Could you share a bit what you do in terms of Harvard Business School and how you have connected with David in this created the Bringing Fraud to Fraud?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to. So it's very, very nice to be together, the three of us, on this wonderful show. I like the spirit and the positivity that you bring to this area, Sam-Erik, very much. And so it's a pleasure to be here. So I work, as you mentioned, at Harvard Business School. I write about decision makers, so leadership personalities, people who are managing teams. And then my personal area of interest over the years gravitated towards the front line. And how do you actually support the people who are out doing the work? Once you start to focus on these individuals, then you realize that middle management is really the frontline supervisors, all the people who are doing this very important job of motivating, but also controlling and executing what top management wants. So they're really the shock absorbers. When you think about these individuals, one of the roles that they do play is to enforce rules. And I was connected through a former research associate to Dr. Morrison and his work, and they said you two should meet. I think you'd have a lot in common. And so we've since written about fraud. We've written about how you manage mental health leaves, the impact of technology on empathy, and I thought he would be a phenomenal person to bring on your podcast.
Wonderful. I'm actually honored and delighted, Cara, that you brought David on board. So David, tell me about your involvement in bringing Freud to fraud. Sounds very interesting. Understanding the state of mind, I found that actually fascinating, and I have to read more about this after our podcast. And I encourage also the viewers and listeners to dig deep into this topic. So, and how it also relates to your work with several companies in a management consultation capacity.
Yeah, thank you very much. It really is an honor. I would want to highlight Chicago. I'm based in Chicago. Right now, Chicago is just briefly the center of the world as we have a national convention. And it's a wonderful place to travel to. So I want to encourage all your listeners to come to Chicago, particularly beautiful this time of year in the fall. I'm here in Chicago, believe it or not, because our business started in the basement of a little tiny house in Topeka, Kansas. Talk about flyover country. Sometimes Chicago is considered flyover country, but Topeka was really flyover country. And they basically, we discovered that there was an interest in what we were doing in mental health. The practice was started by my father, also a psychiatrist, and private industry, in particular in professional service firms. The idea being just similar to hospitality, that a large part of the success is based on how customers are treated, how accountants treat their customers, Arthur Andersen, how Continental bankers treat their customers is critical to their financial success, not just the mathematical models and the latest technology. So we moved from Topeka to Chicago, and we've been here for almost 50 years. Will be 50 years in 26. And as we moved, we realized, and the consultations and the services progressed, we realized judgment of leaders is particularly important. And then ironically, also misjudgment of leaders is tragically important. Both Continental Bank and Arthur Andersen were brought down. These are world-class, top-shelf organizations considered the best in their fields, and they were brought down by fraud. So it wasn't a direct interest of mine. It was more a matter of, I need to understand this, because it's impacting my work and impacting my practice, and it probably ought to be better understood. So as we've explored judgment and thought about the implications of it, it's a parallel, complementary area to which Carin is working on related to decision making. The flip side of it is also very pertinent now to your audience and to what you've come to know, I'm sure, which is how do people manage stress? Because when people are stressed, their judgment can be impaired. And sort of when people have solid judgment, they're generally very good at handling stress. So I like to say it's the flip side of the same coin.
Okay, so our episode today will be a conversation, and since I'm coming from the hospitality background, and in fact, I'm quite familiar with Chicago, and somehow these anecdotes that I have will be from a place not very far from you, David. Okay. I was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and yes. I landed in Chicago, and I was taken then by car to the area. So I spent three years, almost 4 years in Lake Geneva. And Lake Geneva, for those who don't know, is a very popular weekend destination for people from Chicago or Milwaukee. And they have some beautiful resorts. And exactly what usually happens in beautiful resorts, you have also some fraudulent activity from the customers and also from the staff. So in that sense, I think the conversation will have quite an interesting spin to it, because I didn't realize first that you are from Chicago area, and I must have been around about that time when you moved to, or your father moved to Chicago. I was going to Lake Geneva, so that was quite interesting. Yeah.
Yes, very good.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful place to visit.
Sure. But let's start again with a discussion on how you see the psychological factors that drive guests, staff, and management to commit fraud in different industries, and then I can also take some aspects of where I see the hotel side and hospitality, and how do these differ across these groups?
You bet. You bet. Let's build a little bit on where you started. Obviously, I'm coming with the psychological behavioral science side of things, and it's a multidiscipline problem to solve. So, on our team, on that book you referenced, the ABCs: bad apple, bad bushel, bad crop. It's a team of not only psychiatrists and psychologists, but also law enforcement and accounting professionals. So you really need all three to solve it. What we offer that's unique, or what we've brought to the problem or been bringing to the problem for since 2013, when the ideas kind of came together, is this idea of what's the behavior, not only of the criminal, the fraudster, but what is the victim doing? There are three ways to steal from somebody. You can use force, the threat of force, a knife or a gun, and say, give me all you got, like out of the West of America. You can come in the middle of the night and steal it out of the mattress, like the Pink Panther or something like that from Europe, perhaps. And the fascinating thing that I find is this dance of fraud, because essentially it requires the cooperation of the other person. They're playing along in the deception. They get played, I guess is a better way to say it. It's a dance. And a lot of it, as we've talked in preparation for this conversation, Sam-Erik, a lot of it is tied to manipulation of friendliness, manipulation of positive feelings, as well as rapid escalation of negative feelings. So there's kind of in the Midwest, we have the cold air meets the hot air and you get thunderstorms. In this situation, you've got a lot of technical people that have a depth of mathematics and accounting or banking, and they get, bamboozled by somebody charming. In your world, I would imagine they get taken advantage of, and in terms of wanting to do best by the customer, and then the customer knowing that, taking advantage of the goodwill of the staff. And that can happen all over the system, I would imagine. So that's my interest in your world.
Yeah, but there must be some sort of a motivation. Is it the motivation, the financial motivation, or is it just somehow a motivation that triggers that thing that, well, I'm going to see I can get away with this attitude, or
that what is really fascinating of this, you can kind of think of it in some ways kind of like military escalations through the years. You've got offense, you've got defense, you've got fraudsters trying to do stuff, counter fraudsters. And often when I'm presenting to audiences, they're particularly interested in cutting to the chase. They tell me what the fraudster looks like. And of course, as soon as you put out the profile of the fraudster, they know what not to do. So it's very important to think comprehensively about what might be all of the possible motivations for somebody to commit fraud. And by thinking more broadly and comprehensively about motivations, we can begin to be on an alert and at least vigilant to it. We don't want to be vigilant, paranoid all the time. But yeah, motivations can be around, it's a game, it's an assignment. Other people are doing it, so I might as well do it. I like to get along with others, and this is part of what the industry does, or I like to rebel against others, and I want to show the hotel management who's boss. So it kind of depends on the individual, whether or not we're talking about an apple, a bushel, or a crop, but motivations can be very wide ranging. One of the more important things, however, I think to remember, particularly from management, Sam, is for the most part, fraudsters do not go into it saying, I'm going to do this because I'm greedy. And a lot of people, when they write the headlines in the business section or they summarize it, they say that guy is greedy. It looks like that to us, but on the inside to them, they don't see themselves as greedy.
Yeah.
David, would it be right that usually you start with a little bit and then you see if it works and then you might do a little bit more? Or do you feel that it's usually binary? Because it feels like there might be a personality context also to it. And then I think now a broader cultural context, which is we are in a society that is increasingly low trust. In a low trust society, I don't think that anybody's going to protect me, nor do I think that anybody's watching for me. And so we're seeing more and more of this little misbehaving at a local level, tourists trespassing, tourists ignoring closing times for cemeteries, behaving disrespectfully in churches. And so I think there's also a beginning of the culture, which is to say, nobody cares about me, so I shouldn't care about anything.
Exactly.
And it is okay for me to steal a little bit because,
Yeah.
the whole system has failed me. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's reflected quite a bit in hotels. Has been reflecting for hotels for quite some time. That attitude, and where cases where the customer thinks that, well, I pay for the room, so what's in the room is mine,
mhm.
and then it can go quite dramatic, and they see what they can get away with. I mean, it's not about taking the shampoo or anything. It's more than that. One of my favorite small thing where it started very small, and we had this couple came to a restaurant in Lake Geneva at the resort in a fine dining room, and fine dining room for you in the United States, especially the formal dining, and taking the inspiration from French cuisine and also the service standards. So we had this couple coming in, and I was in charge of one station, and so we started with a salad. And I had the hunch that something was not 100%. There was a little bell ringing, and I noticed that the lady took from her purse at that time they're using matches, a matchbox, and I saw something she took out of that matchbook and put something in the salad. So I just started to circle to that area, and she's been eating most of the salad because the portion in the United States are quite big. So that was her meal, and I think she had the idea that, well, let's see what happens. So then she called with a very angry face and snapped her fingers at me like looking for her pet or something. So I walked up there to see what happened. She said, "Look, there's a fly in my salad."
Oh my gosh.
Well, I saw what happened, but I felt that, okay, is it really worthwhile for the salad that costs us at that time maybe $3 or $4 to make, and to raise a fuss out of this? Or should I just let it slide? I want to see, well, what's the next reaction. And turns out that they were so angry, so to speak, that they decided to walk out, and we didn't charge for that salad. Obviously, we didn't offer them any compensation or anything, but that was just a starting point. And what happened, and what usually happens in these situations, that this kind of, particularly if they're staying in the hotel, the message gets very quickly through. And this was pre-digital era. We make sure that we what we call flagged the guest to watch out for any others. And that little fly in the salad was basically a trigger that we realized that if they're going to try something else, they're not going to get away with it anymore. So that's just kind of a small thing that can happen, and it happens today. Sure, it happens today because there is always embarrassing for the chef, embarrassing for the staff, particularly a fine restaurant, a fine dining where they charge high number. It's a high ticket offering there. That if something happens, it's embarrassing if it's true.
And now also the guests have the social media threat, which is, if you don't comp me, then I will have your fly all over social media. So there's also a shift in the balance of power. You don't have hotels broadcasting about evil guests. I mean, I'm sure there are some channels on TikTok, but so there's also an asymmetry of power.
Yes.
I think that the digital age has given here to the customer.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a very important point that is around now. And I remember from my last position, we had a couple who had all kinds of issues with us, and they threatened at that time. Facebook has just started. They threatened to write on Facebook to just announce to the world how terrible that is, and also to make sure they put my name on there. And it was a kind of a unnerving situation when you're being threatened by those people. Yeah.
And that's intentional. That's part of the manipulation of the emotions, is to make you vigilant, to put you back on your heels. It's a bit of a boxing match, or a game of deception, like the fly and the box of matches. One thing that I think we can all appreciate is similar to driving down the road. We have a lot of people that are courteous and respecting other drivers. And then there's the person that's racing. They may be on their mobile phone. They're looking erratic and dangerous. So, like, similarly in your work as you did, once those people have kind of identified themselves, then it's easier on the hotel management team and the staff to be able to watch for them. What I think would be hard would be if that is done at the very end of the visit, perhaps just as they're checking out on either side, whether it's the hotel that all of a sudden now has these charges that I never agreed to, or they're embedded in this complex bill that I don't understand, or it's somebody else who's choosing to pay with something that doesn't have any value.
Yeah.
I imagine you see those kind of things.
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, the guest who does exactly the way you're describing it, so there, where you feel that towards the end of the stay, I mean, they are already started. I mean, there's an example I shared before our recording, but I can share it now about the wonderful, overly psychopathic behaving couple who was charming everybody. And what happened was that when they checked in, they gave the bellman at that time $50 for to carrying the baggage. And it wasn't like, let me help you with your luggage. They say, the bellman was really, let me hurry with your baggage and let me, escort you to your room. And he got $50. And that immediately, message went like wildfire to the entire hotel. Flag this lovely couple, look after them. They are here to enjoy themselves, and they will reward us for our excellent service. But then they went one step further, because usually then the typical thing, if they give the bellman, that's one thing. But they took that extra step, which I was so fascinated about, and I will not ever forget them. I still remember in front of what they looked like. I mean, well dressed. Sort of sophisticated, and they want to meet the general manager to thank him already in advance how they are looking forward to their stay. And in the moment, they gave a small gift as a token of appreciation in advance of their lovely stay, a small gold coin. And the general manager was so taken that and of this token of appreciation given to him already. Of course, he didn't mention anything to the staff, but his secretary saw this. So, of course, she wanted to spread the good news. So you really have to look after these people now. They even gave our GM, our general manager, this gold coin. So it was only one factor that was very different to this case. They said that, well, we have just a small request here. That is it possible you can send us the bill to our company in Chicago? And usually, if the general manager agrees on that, then basically no one will dispute this. Not even the credit manager, no one will dispute what has happened here. So because at that time, in the typical hierarchy of hotels, when the general manager says this is okay to go ahead, then nobody will start to screen this. So this couple was very clever. They buttered up the general manager with a gold coin. They came to the restaurant where I was working, and they knew what to order. It was only grilled lobster. It was sort of a nice sea bass or Dover sole from England. Everything was sort of the top notch. It was foie gras as an appetizer. So I really appreciated that, how they knew how to enjoy a nice meal, and they left with me with a fantastic tip. Mm-hmm. So they stayed for 1 week and had a great time, and they had dinner every night, and they always asked for me to serve them because they enjoy the way I was preparing the Caesar salad for them. And so I was more than happy to do that. And they said, well, Sam-Erik, could you put extra garlic? Because I like extra garlic. Of course. So I made all that for them. And then end of the evening was a crepe Suzette as a dessert with my compliments, because they have already tipped me so much. So I offered them the crepe Suzette. Now, and 1 week, they left, and we sent them the bill, which was at that time in thousands of dollars, because they have to enjoy themselves. They took also, of course, they took the limousine to Chicago, but they didn't go to a home address. They was taken to a hotel, and then they evidently disappeared after that. Mm-hmm. When the invoice was sent to the address they given, it bounced back. Mm-hmm. What happened was then, this was a fantastic, well-manipulated case of fraud where things got out of hand because we were naive at that time. And it's a example that kind of, I still remember after all these years, because I remember the couple very well. You know, there are a few things in your life that you remember, how they look at you, how they smile. And then when they smile at you, there's a little bit something a little bit kind of creepy about it, but you kind of accept it because there was, you just accept maybe that's how they are. So yeah, that's just an example of what happened to me during that time. But I'd like to move forward with the conversation, how you see, what are the things that we should be looking after and care for that because there is that manipulation factor, which I think is so excellent how the masters are doing it.
So one thing that I would look after if I had been the management team of that hotel is, did you all discuss it at all? Was there an opportunity here to bring the team together and to say, so we had this sustained fraud. You all benefited. So to use David's language, you know, there's a victim, but there's also a willing collaborator or assister. You know, did you all commit a form of fraud by collecting all the money that you could and overindulging these guests when supposedly you're trying to take care of everybody else? This is, you know, I'm paying to be served. And yet these individuals are getting more of your attention. So you're defrauding your other guests from the attention that you're showering on this individual. So was there any discussion at all here about what had happened and what you had learned from the various component pieces of this sustained fraud?
Well, we were like in the early 20s, and we were just very happy to have our pockets full of money. So there was no discussion, and we took what we got out of them. And you're absolutely right. At that time, the spotlight was on the guest. Not that the other guests were ignored, but they were clearly getting an extra attention that. Maybe unevenly divided attention was on them as a result of that from everyone at the hotel.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal example. It reminds me even of the CEO of Citigroup, I think, when the CDOs collapsed. And he said, we all knew the music would stop, but we didn't know when. So you would just keep on dancing, you know, like musical chairs. And so this is how there are a lot of 20-year-olds or a lot of us who keep on dancing because it feels good, which is why this is so endemic. David, what do you think is to learn or to do? How could we have done this differently?
Yeah, well, that idea, you know, the military calls it an after-action review and sort of post-mortem is relatively new in business teams. I mean, progressive managers or thoughtful managers or managers who just like to run their business well have been doing it forever, right? But to formally do it, to be thoughtful about doing it is relatively rare. I would imagine it was rare at this time. The other thing that makes it difficult is people don't like to talk about things that are embarrassing, that are real screw ups, you know, that have egg on your face, so to speak. So there's a lot of factors to not talk about it. And that's when it makes it worse. So what I love there's multiple things I love about it. First of all is, as you tell it, although we've heard it before, Carin and I are smiling, right? Because we know what's coming. We know this is in the context of fraud. These guys are charming. I like this kind of psychopathy versus the really nasty ones because they're just little scoundrels, you know, and they're naughty. They're like naughty kids. But nevertheless, they are expensive. It's roughly 3 to 5% of the GDP. It's a lost efficiency in the marketplace. It's a unfortunate cost of business. And you asked about it earlier, Carin, but I imagine this would be a case. A colleague of mine says nobody ever started at $1 million and worked their way down. So these are probably pretty sophisticated people that started out with something and now have polished it to a fine point and can take it to the best restaurants. And I remember that case as we talked in advance of this program, as a reminder that even though technology can do lots of cool stuff, these basic fundamental things of deceiving each other can still work. So your clients, your customers need to stay vigilant to that. And obviously, if you do the after-action reviews, that can be helpful. And then I guess one final thing, in addition to the kind of, oh no, we know where this is going, these naughty people, they're going to rip this hotel off. But that's because we knew it in advance. Two things that's really important about emotions. They stick around. They have a memory. They set down memory that's why we have powerful dreams. That's why you can close your eyes and picture those people. When my wife and I were just starting out, our house got robbed. I can still close my eyes and picture scenes from the day when I came back to the house and found that it had robbed. That's just the way emotions work. The
Yeah.
other thing that's cool about it, I mean this in a good way, that you can remember it, is you can also picture that false affiliative smile. There was something creepy about it. And you have that for the rest of your life. And so if you see that and feel that again, it's just like your immune system. You've got the antibodies to that. And those are the kind of things that experienced managers, experienced hoteliers or restaurateurs or whatever can pass along to the team and say, look, these guys are charming, but my hair on the back of my neck is up. Keep your eyes open. Let's go into this thoughtfully, prepared.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is through the years I worked in the industry actively, from whether I was a restaurant waiter, captain, or manager, up to general manager or a regional position. There was something always I could take with me, but I learned from this particular event. But also another event was when we're looking at, after all, in hotels we have staff and staff who are also looking at taking advantage of that the checks and balances are not 100%, or they're creating a relationship with their colleague so they can do some fraudulent activities. And in one case we had not in Lake Geneva anymore, was another place in the world where we had a city hotel where we had a night clerk, a night auditor, who had access at that time, and this is pre-digital period, so he had access to, we required every guest to record their credit card, so as a reference, credit reference, so they can stay at the hotel and we didn't charge. But he was able to find a way to find either a PIN number or somehow to charge that to that card, somehow that he was able to get some money out of it. I don't remember exactly the details how that worked, but he, at the end of the day, the customers was leaving, and suddenly there was a huge charge on his credit card, and he couldn't understand since he had not bought anything. So this was a kind of interesting situation that where the vigilance towards the staff also, and that's also where the procedures, following procedure comes in. That has to be very, everybody has to follow those rules regardless of a friend or so on.
Mm-hmm. And now it's a little bit sad because now we're getting more and more procedures. Right now, when I used to go to swim in the lake in Germany, you just swim in the lake, and now you have a sign that says, "Do not smoke, do not drink, do not use fire, do not drown anyone, do not break glass." And so you wind up in environments where there's so many things not to do.
Yes.
And we have lost track of what is it important to do.
Yes.
Which is not to take what we don't have, not to manipulate others. And so I think this focus on sort of structure of the culture in the hospitality business is really important, because at the end of the day, we will never think of all the clever things that our staff will do because they're just more intelligent than management. So, but we can think about what are the values that you might want to underline for them to keep. One thing, David, that I thought might be very helpful for Sam-Erik's audience is to talk a little bit about the roles. We talked a little bit about the victims, the marks and the larks, but also the role of the park rangers.
Oh, yeah.
Because ever since I heard that framework, I see it all the time. I even write about it in my cases, because when you think of business issues or transformations, there are various roles that people play. Right. So if we have a few more minutes, David, I think that would be maybe very helpful for the managerial audience.
Thank you, Carin. Yeah, I want to go back to that because it'll fit with the model, that idea that you talked about earlier about social respect and social kindness, social fabric. I mean, that can be another kind of tip as a family or a couple or an individual comes into your hotel or restaurant. Are they, is the respect and the warm feeling reciprocated? So if they're trashing the place, if they're rude, if they're damaging property, as my friend would say in the law enforcement, that's what we call a clue. But, right. Yeah. So thank you, Carin. The model that we had kind of came out of the ABCs because We were obviously thinking about the individual. What is the profile? What is the psychological motivation? How can we build a model around that? And then what's happening with the emotions that essentially the spider and the fly, what's happening in the victim, the prey that they are getting conned. The person with the gold coin, we would call that an affiliative scam because they make it look like they're friendly. That's what Bernie Madoff did. They look like one of us. How would they ever betray us? We love them. They're wonderful. They're one of us. They're perfect guests.